Have you ever met someone who somehow turns every conversation into money? You mention a vacation, and they immediately ask how much it cost. You talk about your new phone, and they want to know the price. Someone gets married, buys a house, starts a business, and their first question is always about money. At first, it can seem shallow. You might think they're greedy, materialistic, or obsessed with wealth. But psychology tells us something much more interesting. In many cases, people who constantly talk about money aren't just talking about money. They're talking about security. They're talking about status. They're talking about fear. And sometimes they're talking about self-worth without even realizing it. Money is never just pieces of paper or numbers in a bank account. For the human brain, money represents something much bigger. It represents survival, freedom, power, achievement, and even love. That's why conversations about money often reveal far more about a person's mind than their wallet. Let's begin with the first psychological reason. For some people, money equals safety. Imagine growing up in a home where every bill caused arguments, where your parents constantly worried about paying rent, where unexpected expenses meant weeks of stress. Experiences like these can shape the brain for years. Psychologists sometimes refer to this as a scarcity mindset. When someone has repeatedly experienced not having enough, the brain becomes highly sensitive to anything related to financial security. Even after becoming financially comfortable, that mental alarm system doesn't always switch off. These people may constantly discuss salaries, investments, savings, or prices. Not because they're trying to impress anyone, but because their brain has learned that money is directly connected to survival. To them, talking about money feels like talking about oxygen. The second reason is social status. Human beings have always compared themselves to others. Thousands of years ago, status might have depended on physical strength or hunting ability. Today, one of the most visible symbols of status is money. According to social comparison theory, we naturally evaluate ourselves by comparing our lives with those around us. Some people compare appearance, some compare careers, others compare income. When someone frequently mentions expensive purchases, luxury brands, business success, or high salaries, they may not simply be sharing information. They may be measuring where they stand. Without realizing it, they're asking a silent question. Am I successful enough? Interestingly, research suggests that people often overestimate how much others judge their financial success. In reality, most people are far more focused on their own lives than on someone else's bank account. Now, here's something even more fascinating. Sometimes talking about money isn't confidence, it's insecurity wearing an expensive suit. Psychologists have long studied what's known as compensation behavior. When people feel uncertain in one area of life, they sometimes compensate by emphasizing another. Someone who secretly feels insignificant may constantly highlight financial achievements. Someone who doesn't feel respected may use money as evidence of success. Someone afraid of being overlooked may talk about wealth because they believe it's what earns admiration. This doesn't mean every wealthy person is insecure. Not at all. Many successful people rarely discuss money. The point is that the frequency of talking about money can sometimes reveal emotional needs that have very little to do with money itself. Another reason people constantly discuss money is identity. Think about athletes. Many naturally talk about sports. Artists often notice beauty everywhere. Doctors may discuss health. Entrepreneurs frequently think about business. Likewise, if someone spends most of their day investing, building companies, negotiating deals, or studying financial markets, money naturally becomes a major part of their conversations. In this case, it's simply what occupies their attention. The brain talks about what the brain repeatedly practices. There's nothing unusual about that. But here's where things become more complicated. Some people unknowingly attach their self-worth to their net worth. Instead of thinking, I have money, their mind slowly begins believing, I am my money. This psychological fusion can become dangerous. Because if income drops, if investments fail, if a business struggles, their confidence collapses with it. Why? Because losing money feels like losing themselves. Healthy self-esteem comes from many sources: character, relationships, values, resilience, kindness, curiosity, and purpose. When self-worth depends on only one thing, life becomes emotionally fragile. There's another psychological force at work that most people never notice: Attention. Our brains are remarkably good at finding whatever we repeatedly focus on. Psychologists call this selective attention. When someone constantly monitors prices, investments, salaries, or business opportunities, their brain starts filtering the world through money. Every conversation becomes connected to profit. Every situation becomes an opportunity. Every story eventually circles back to finances. It's not always intentional. The brain simply becomes trained to notice what it believes matters most. So, should you judge someone just because they always talk about money? Probably not. Their behavior could come from childhood experiences. It could come from professional interests. It could reflect ambition, or it could reveal hidden fears and insecurities. Without knowing their story, it's impossible to know which explanation fits. Psychology reminds us that behavior is usually more complex than it appears on the surface. The next time someone keeps bringing up money instead of asking, why are they so obsessed with money? Try asking a different question. What does money represent to them? Security? Freedom? Recognition? Control? Success? Or perhaps something they never received growing up? Because in psychology, people rarely reveal themselves through what they say. They reveal themselves through what they repeatedly return to. And sometimes the conversation isn't really about money at all. It's about the human need to feel safe, valuable, and enough.